All right, welcome everybody. Good to see you again. We weren't live last week. So let's start with a meditation. First, notice all the sounds, the colors, the temperature, all the stimuli. And then notice the awareness in which the stimuli come to light. So shifting attention from the objects of our attention to the attention itself that illumines the object. So when our awareness is on the attention itself and not primarily on the object, then the objects lose their hold. Whether it's the brightest light or the loudest sound or different temperatures, shifting from the object to the attention keeps more of the resources within. Now, with the attention, notice that attention itself has a kind of direction and intensity to it. Just like if you were to throw a ball, that ball has a certain density, certain direction or velocity. Similarly, even attention is directed in a way, held in a way. What is it that is aware of the intensity, direction, and configuration of attention? And now bring this openness, this space, let's say it's space, bring it back to the sense of directionality. Give it that form of directionality and intensity. And now open the eyes, and we can sense that that direction of attention now captures the forms and colors and sounds that kind of are streaming now. So the second mind itself, differentiating as the localized sense of awareness and identity, which has the capacity to direct attention and note what appears to be another, a screen, a sound, a thing, a person talking, when in fact that other itself is a differentiated aspect of the second mind. So it's like the iceberg that has two peaks above the surface of the water, and it looks like one peak feels like it's looking at another peak, the other peak is looking at the other peak. And but in fact, when the attention is traced down, it's recognized that, okay, I am one, and this I differentiates into the many. So this, in a sense, is the process of meditation, is sinking ever deeper, even below sea level, so that the apparent multiplicity reveals its roots. So if you have any questions or comments, please do put them in. We talked about, in the preceding talk, we talked about the misconceptions of consciousness, and what we covered today was the idea that consciousness is primarily an individual phenomenon. We know we experience it as an individual phenomenon from the first mind perspective, and yet we also know that we are not restricted to this individual phenomenon. And that is all the other perspectives of plurality, of family, of community, of feeling a kinship with plants, with animals, even with the objects that we acquire. These are all revealing as to the nature of consciousness. Though we think about them simply as attachment, they're actually revealing the scope of consciousness. And beyond that, of course, the second mind, which is not generally a part of the societal discourse. But all of these indicate that consciousness is not primarily an individual phenomenon, though it can be experienced as such through the first mind. So Shirley said, that was nice to feel self-awareness and not such a dread anxiety of finishing a job. I actually got the answer to it. Yeah. So this is common, that in meditation, everything that hasn't been processed, so to speak, or everything that hasn't been felt will come up. So, for example, yesterday there was a shift in the ER, and you can imagine that in the ER there's a lot of pain. There are people in all kinds of different pain. And so that pain will be there in that experience. And so later, in silence, in closing the eyes, those feelings will come up. And that's part of the process of living, right? At a fundamental level, we are all connected, right? At a more fundamental level than the multiplicity, there is a connection. So there is that ability to empathize, to feel. And so those feelings will come up quite naturally. And as we experience that, and as the system remains open to experience and release, right? It's a mental ecosystem. Just like wind that blows in from the north is going to go towards the south, right? It's not going to come from the north and just get stuck and stop there. It has to cycle. right? The water has to evaporate, become clouds, rain down, evaporate, come down, cyclical. The cyclical nature of things is revealing about the wholeness, right? Because when something is a whole unit, there is a self-feedback loop. So all this to say that it is important to experience these and allow them to cycle and allow them to process and allow them to release. And in doing that more and more, that sense of openness remains. And that is when that sense of dread doesn't stay there, right? Because there's no longer that fear of what has not been examined or what has not been coming up. So at a certain amount of time, just like if you were to take a bucket and take a cup and start pouring out the water, right? Cup by cup, you're emptying the bucket. There's a certain period of time where that bucket is open because that has been cleared out. Even if there's more water coming in, you've taken out enough that it's being cleared out as it's coming in. And that's kind of the process of a lifetime. As experiences come and they occupy and fill the mind, they are also experienced and processed. And there's this continuous cycling that is happening. And that is when that sense of dread diminishes, when we feel safe and we feel that uncertainty, that somehow the uncertainty itself is a kind of certainty. It's kind of a revolutionary certainty. And there, that sense of dread and that sense of anxiety that, oh boy, what is there? Is this coming up? That tends to go away because that becomes a new kind of baseline. Norm says, could you define the third mind as you see it? No, I can't define the third mind as I see it. First of all, it's not that I see it, right? When we ask if a person sees it, that I tends to refer to the first mind itself. So it's not that the first mind recognizes the second mind, nor that the first recognizes the third, but the first itself is the expression of the second, right? And both, we may say, is the nature of the third mind. So I cannot define it. But what I can say is, just as the first mind makes more and more sense as the second mind perspective is appreciated. You can look at it from two directions, right? From the first mind perspective, the second mind can't really be understood. It sounds very complex, or it sounds very dense, or it sounds incredibly abstract, because it is the very boundary of the first mindedness that incapacitates it from recognizing its nature as the second mind. Right? Just as it is the walls of the house that define the house. And if the house wants to understand open space, then the walls have to come down, meaning that it has to, in a sense, no longer be a house. Right? So, but from the other perspective, the second mind can appreciate that it can express itself also as walls, also as the first mind. So, similarly to that, just as that perspective makes more sense from the second mind perspective, similarly, that second mind, which is this all encompassing unboundedness, which expresses as the bound, that too cannot itself recognize the third mind, because the third mind is not about the dance of the one and the many. The second mind dances the one and the many, but that which is beyond the one and the many, right, which is appreciated by that second mind at rest, right, when it is not superimposing anything within itself, when there is no question of boundary or no boundary. This is the third mind. So Shirley Mason said, dump the anxiety bucket. I don't know. I think a lot of these, it depends what works for a person. You know, for some people, it's helpful to name something as anxiety. Just like here, it's helpful to name something as the first mind and the second mind, and thereby see kind of different configurations, different perspectives. So similarly, naming something as anxiety maybe can be helpful. For another person, it might not be helpful. It might make things more difficult because it kind of reifies it and makes something even more real. as opposed to a passing experience that many people would have. So it depends on what works, what is more helpful in living well. And Shirley said, is it possible to have spontaneous Kundalini experience? Yes, it is possible. Spontaneity, of course, is relative, as all of these terms are. From the first mind perspective, it may appear spontaneous. From a second mind perspective, it is not that it is unrelated to anything, right? There is some set of factors at play that bring about such an experience at a particular time, but it may not be obvious. And therefore, if a person is talking about their story or somebody's saying something about a spontaneous, it can seem spontaneous. Right? Many things can seem, but again, going back to the cyclical nature of things, one feeds into the other, right? Past, present, future, cause, effect, one feeds into the other. So anything that's happening now, including obviously me talking here, we can say this is caused by me sitting in this chair 30 minutes ago. And if I didn't sit in this chair 30 minutes ago, then this talk wouldn't be happening, which is true. Now, the question is whether we see the causal relationship between the two, or whether we see the relationship at all between the two. So, similarly, just because something appears spontaneous, it doesn't mean that there is a set of factors that is not at play. It is just that our attention in our society is not on those factors, and therefore it can appear spontaneous. Visions involving feeling of healing in the morning gives hope, but then it's like, where is it? So what we're looking for from the second mind perspective is always here. It doesn't mean that we don't have to act. Doesn't mean I don't have to go anywhere. Doesn't mean I don't have to do anything. But in terms of where this is, the resources are here. And it's a matter of seeing how that applies, what the meaning of that is in this particular context. Right? If you check out healing, the word healing, there are a couple talks on this if you go to Second Mind Medicine. Second Mind Medicine. There are a few notes on there about healing. Healing in vision comes from outside. It may. It can come from outside also. All right, let's take a couple minutes. Tunneling into the resources that are here. And then opening the walls of the tunnel so that it is no longer a tunnel, rather an open space of resource. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, you can post them here or on the website, and we'll try to address those next time. All right. Shirley said, is this tour book? No, Second Mind Medicine is not the book. The books are on the website. If you go here and scroll down, then the websites are there.